Hi, and welcome to our discussion essay writing lesson. In this lesson, we will write a discussion essay together. Our essay topic for today is this: the wealth of the United Arab Emirates has historically come from the oil deposits in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE. If Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will collapse. Discuss this statement. So, firstly, the most important thing is that we fully understand the question. Now, what this question is saying is that the entire UAE economy is dependent on the oil in Abu Dhabi. If this oil finishes, the entire UAE economy will fall apart. Now, when we look at this question, we know we're going to write a discussion essay because the question word that is used is discuss. So what this means is that we're going to look at both some opinions that support the idea that if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will collapse, and we're going to look at some that refute this idea. So if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will not collapse, will not fall apart. Before we get to writing, it is very important that we understand the scope of the question. Scope is basically the areas that the question pinpoints, the areas that you are allowed to talk about. When we look at this question, there are three basic areas. One is the UAE as a whole, as a country. The next is Abu Dhabi oil reserves. So the oil that's in Abu Dhabi, we can talk about that. And finally is the UAE economy. It's another area we can talk about. Anything outside of these three areas would be incorrect. This is going off onto a tangent, and this is not something you want to include in your essay. Okay, so now the main sentence that's important in this essay question is the second sentence. If Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will collapse. So because we're going to discuss this, we need to think of some points that agree with this and some points that refute this. And if refute is a new word for you, it's just the opposite of agree. So refute is also disagree. Just make this look a little bit nicer. Okay. So now, if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will collapse. Well, a point that could agree with this, and I thought about this prior to making the video, is that the UAE has historically been dependent on Abu Dhabi's oil. So we'll say UAE has historically been dependent on Abu Dhabi's oil. Okay, so we can say in effect that because this has historically been true, well, this will still be true in the future. That would be a way to agree with this statement. Now, if we come down to refute it, well, perhaps we might want to argue that today there are many, many industries in the UAE that contribute to the UAE economy. So something along the lines of UAE has many industries that contribute to it. So if there is no more oil in Abu Dhabi, well, this is irrelevant because the UAE will be upheld by many different industries. Okay, so now that we fully understand the essay question, let's just look at a breakdown of what makes up discussion essay. So basically, a discussion essay is 4 paragraphs long. It contains an introduction paragraph, it contains 2 supporting paragraphs, and it contains a concluding paragraph. Now in this essay we've already outlined that we're going to focus on one point of view, which is supporting. This is our agree area up here, and one point of view that's refuting. And in the supporting paragraph, that's going to be our agree portion. This is the area we're going to talk about in agreement with this. Supporting paragraph number 2 will be the refute area. Okay. Now the introduction paragraph. So if you watched the video before, I'm sure all this is a review for you. Now the first sentence we need to come up with is a background statement about this topic. So we might want to start with something about the UAE and oil in the UAE. So we might say something like, traditionally, the UAE's economy has been completely reliant on oil. The second sentence is just more detail about this first sentence. So perhaps we might want to say something about the new industries that are coming up, or that have been growing very quickly. So let's say within the past, I'm just kind of pulling this out of my head, but 15 years, however, its economy has diversified. Okay. And now what's very important to remember in a discussion essay is that we're not giving our opinion until the very end of the essay. So if we look at these first 2 lines, well, these are just stating facts. They're not saying what our opinion is as the writer of this essay. We're just saying a couple of facts. Okay. Now the third sentence states the 2 points of view that we're going to talk about. So the 2 points of view are that some people agree that the UAE economy will fall apart if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, and some people refute that the UAE economy will fall apart if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil. So we want to stick these into one sentence, and we would say something along the lines of, some believe that the UAE economy will collapse if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, and some refute this. Okay. Some believe that the UAE economy will collapse if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, and some refute this. So in this sentence we've stated the 2 points of view that we're going to talk about in this essay. Now the last sentence is very simple and just says what order we're going to talk about these points of view in. So we might say something like these. Points of view will be discussed in this order. Okay, that is the introduction paragraph. It's finished. So all it's done is it said what we're going to talk about, the areas, and then it said the 2 points of view we're specifically going to focus on, and finally the order that we're going to do that in. And when you read the paragraph, you do not know what our opinion is as writers, and that's a good thing. We won't be telling our opinion until the very end of the essay. Okay, and the first supporting paragraph is concerned with agreeing with the idea that if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will fall apart. So if we just look at a skeleton of what we're going to do, So in supporting paragraph 1, now the first thing we're going to do is state what the point of view is. Secondly, we're going to come up with some kind of example. Thirdly, we'll write a sentence that's a discussion statement, and basically all a discussion statement does is link the example to the point of view. And finally, a conclusion. And the conclusion sentence in supporting paragraphs for discussion essays are a little bit tricky, because all we want to say is that we understand why people support this point of view, but we have to say this in a manner that does not sound like we are saying this. We're just simply saying that we understand that people can support this point of view, that it makes sense to us. Okay, so take this away. So the first thing we need to do is we need to state the point of view that we're going to talk about. So we might say something like, it is believed by some that if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will collapse. We'll just change collapse so we don't keep saying the same word. Will fall apart. Okay, now the second thing would be an example, and so we'd start with something like an example that supports this let's change the word example, because it's not really a specific example, it's an idea. An idea that supports this is the historical fact that the UAE economy has been almost completely dependent on its capital's oil reserves. Its capitals being simply Abu Dhabi. It can be argued that this history will repeat itself, will remain true in the future. Okay, I'll stop right there. So now the example that we just came up with is the same one that we kind of talked about together in the first place, and that's that the UAE has historically been dependent on Abu Dhabi's oil. So it is believed by some that if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will fall apart. An idea that supports this is the historical fact that the UAE economy has been almost completely dependent on its capital's oil reserves. It can be argued that this history will remain true in the future. Thus, now, so here we're just in the last sentence just saying that that this makes sense, that this example supports this point of view. So because we've supported it correctly, we can understand why someone could possibly believe this point of view or agree with this point of view. So thus it is clear why some people gravitate towards this. Did we use point of view already? No, point of view. Okay. Okay, now moving on to supporting paragraph 2. Let's put in another skeleton. supporting paragraph 2 follows the same pattern as supporting paragraph 1. The only difference is that we're talking about the second point of view, which is our refute point of view. Now if we just do a little review, it's actually just a reminder for me. Refute, so we were disagreeing and we're using the point the UAE has many industries that contribute. Okay, so the UAE's economy is not only dependent on oil, it's supported by a number of different industries. Thus, if the UAE runs out, if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, it's okay. The UAE will be upheld by these other industries. That's what we're basically going to say. Okay, now so let's take away this. So we might want to use a transition word because we're going from point of view number 1 to point of view number 2. So something like on the other hand, many argue that that Abu Dhabi's oil reserves are not the only industry sorry, change that to Abu Dhabi's oil reserve is not the only industry upholding the UAE economy. For example, industries such as tourism and construction, we'll say, have gained a very strong foothold in the Emirates economy and can let's change this to thus these industries can be expected to support the UAE economy in the absence of oil. There we go. Okay, taking it from the top. So firstly we're stating the second point of view. On the other hand, many argue that Abu Dhabi's oil reserve is not the only industry upholding the UAE economy. For example, industries such as tourism and construction have gained a very strong foothold in the Emirates economy. Okay, I have to double check my punctuation. Emirates economy. Thus, these industries can be expected to support the UAE economy in the absence of oil. Okay, we might even want to stick in here foothold in the Emirates economy over the past 15 years. Thus, these industries can be expected to support the UAE economy in the absence of oil. So now the last sentence, we want to just say that we understand why people support this point of view as well. So after analyzing these facts, it is clear why many support this claim. Okay. So at this point, we have 3 paragraphs. We have an introduction, we have a first supporting paragraph, and we have a second supporting paragraph. And the interesting thing to remember is that at no point have we given our point of view. We've simply supported the points of view of other people. Now, in this last paragraph, we're going to give our point of view and a small summary and basically a small prediction or recommendation. Now, in the concluding paragraph, we want to include 3 key pieces of information. The first being a summary of the points of view that we analyzed. So these are the 2 points of view, the one in paragraph 1 and the one in paragraph 2. And the next thing we want to do is state our point of view. So which one we agree with. Do we refute the statements or do we support the statement? So this is where we say our point of view. Finally, we include a prediction or a recommendation. And I think in this essay we're going to give a prediction, which is basically a guess for what the future holds based on what we support. Now, reading through this essay, I think that that most people would probably support the second point of view, and so that's what we'll stick to when we write our concluding paragraph. So let's get started. Oops. Okay, so the first statement is basically a summary of the 2 supporting paragraphs, the 2 points of view. So we might write something like, for reasons related to history and recent developments, the issue of economic stability in the UAE without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil is supported and refuted by many. I'm just looking at that, it's a really long sentence. For reasons related to history and recent developments, the issue of economic stability in the UAE without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil is supported and refuted by many. Okay, we'll keep it. And now in this next sentence, we want to state our point of view. So we might start with something like however. So however, even though people are supporting, refuting this, we're going to say one that we're in support of. So however, after analyzing these 2 points of view, it is clear that the maybe we'll say something about the historical not changes, the historical conditions in the Emirates have changed. So what was true before, where the entire Emirates was dependent on Abu Dhabi's oil, well, that's not true anymore. Things have changed. Okay, now we're setting up our point of view. Now our point of view will probably be, we want to state our point of view very, very clearly. So the basic question was, I sort of keep jumping around, but the basic question at the beginning was, if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will collapse. Now we want to state very, very clearly whether we support or refute this, and we refute. So thus the argument that the UAE economy would fall apart without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil can not be supported. Okay, so we're just clearly stating that our opinion is in disagreement with this statement. Now the last part, we want to give some sort of prediction for the future, and so we probably want to say something along the lines of, we don't ever expect there to be a scenario where Abu Dhabi runs out of oil and the entire UAE economy collapses. So we might actually we could probably attach this together. So thus the argument that the UAE economy would fall apart without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil cannot be supported and is expected to never be realized, which is a nice way of saying to never come true. Okay, now, so that's the conclusion of the essay. Let's read it together. For reasons related to history and recent developments, the issue of economic stability in the UAE without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil is supported and refuted by many. However, after analyzing these 2 points of view, it is clear that the historical conditions in the Emirates have changed. Thus, the argument that the UAE economy would fall apart without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil cannot be supported and is expected to never be realized. Now, we just said supported twice in the same sentence, which is unattractive. So we could say without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil cannot I'll just change this one. Without the help of Abu Dhabi's oil. Okay, now so that's the essay as a whole. So if we take it from the beginning, and of course if this is on an exam or any essay you're handing in to your institution, you definitely don't want to have these small titles. Now from the top. Traditionally, the UAE's economy has been completely reliant on oil. Within the past 15 years, however, its economy has diversified. Some believe that the UAE economy will collapse if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, and some refute this. These points of view will be discussed in this order. It is believed by some that if Abu Dhabi runs out of oil, the UAE economy will fall apart. An idea that supports this is the historical fact that the UAE economy has been almost completely dependent on its capital's oil reserves. It can be argued that this history will remain true in the future. Thus it is clear why some people gravitate towards this point of view. On the other hand, many argue that Abu Dhabi's oil reserve is not the only industry upholding the UAE economy. For example, industries such as tourism and construction have gained a very strong foothold in the Emirates economy over the past 15 years. Thus these industries can be expected to support the UAE economy in the absence of oil. After analyzing these facts, it is clear why many support this claim. For reasons related to history and recent developments, the issue of economic stability in the UAE without the support of Abu Dhabi's oil is supported and refuted by many. And once again, we used support twice. Is we'll say agreed with and refuted by many. However, after analyzing these 2 points of view, it is clear that the historical conditions in the Emirates have changed. Thus the argument that the UAE economy would fall apart without the help of Abu Dhabi's oil cannot be supported and is expected to never be realized. Okay, I feel this essay is very strong, and we've used a number of linking words which in English is absolutely critical if you're writing an essay. Thus, however, for reasons related to on the other hand, for example, again, thus, after analyzing these facts. So all of these phrases help link the sentences together. One more thing I'd like to point out before concluding is that in no place did we include our opinion in the first 3 paragraphs. So the first 3 paragraphs, we do not see our opinion at all. As well, when we're writing an essay, it's important to remember not to use personal pronouns related to ourselves and our opinions. So we do not want to say things like I think or we think or our opinion is. This is not correct. You cannot use this in an essay. Okay, so that concludes our lesson on how to write a discussion essay. Thank you for listening.